It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you say, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back to another podcast by George. Well, I'd like to give him a break. I'd like to just bring him on maybe once a month, but the circumstances in Iowa and around the country do not allow for that. Dr. Andrew Nish is coming back on the podcast. He's our medical expert that's been talking to us particularly about this COVID pandemic, as it looks like the fourth wave of it sweeps across the country. There are some real frightening prospects with this, and I wanted him to maybe talk me off the ledge a little bit because my wife gets scared, and I got to admit I'm a little concerned also. But for folks that may not know, Dr. Andrew Nish has spent almost the past 3 decades as an interventional radiologist. Doc, I don't want to date you. His passion is educating the public and healthcare workers about true health and well-being and how this can be achieved through lifestyle changes, including food and nutrition, stress management, sleep, exercise, purpose in life, and social relationships. And he's especially fascinated with the mind-body connection, and he speaks about that all the time, and how our thoughts and beliefs directly influence our physical and mental health. And that couldn't be more appropriate than what we're talking about today, I think, because our thoughts and beliefs are affecting this COVID-19 situation. So, Doc, welcome back to a podcast by George.
Thanks, George.
You know, we were talking off air before we came on a little bit. I talk to people all the time that will say, you know, I'm just done with COVID. I'm just done with it. And I tell people, no, I don't think you are. I don't think we are. And I think the latest statistics are bearing that out.
Yeah. Yeah. You might be done with COVID, but COVID isn't done with you.
Exactly.
That's the way I would put it.
Yeah.
You know what we do? We all have COVID fatigue. I don't care what you call it. But you know, this virus isn't going away. This virus will be with us for years and years and years. We just have to learn to manage it and live with it, just like we live with all kinds of microorganisms that we've lived with for decades. Measles, smallpox, which we no longer have, polio, which we no longer have. Why? Vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, we just have to continue to understand that we have to adapt. We're going to live with this organism. We're going to, you know, cohabitate with it, I guess would be a good word. But there are ways to safely cohabitate with it. And then maybe there's some ways that aren't so safe to cohabitate with it. So we can talk a little about that.
Yeah, and let me, I've got some comedian props here, some clips that I can bring up. I want to bring up this first one maybe to get us started here. Now, this is from the Des Moines Register. It says about 52% of Polk County residents are fully vaccinated, according to the Iowa Department of Public Health, placing it in a tie for the 5th most vaccinated county in the state. I think medical practitioners like the doc would like to see us a little higher than that in the percentage and had hoped that we would be better than we are right now. But in 23 of the state's 99 counties, 23 of our 99 counties in Iowa, fewer than 40% of residents are vaccinated after all this time. Now, in 2 counties, Lyon in Iowa's far northwestern corner and Davis on the Missouri border, fewer than 30% of residents are vaccinated. Well, what does Iowa's far northwestern corner and the southwestern edge of Iowa have in common? I'll leave that up to our readers and listeners to surmise. But the the last paragraph reads, in Taylor County, also on the Missouri border, about 38% of the population is fully vaccinated, but health officials have noticed an uptick of vaccine interest among its 6,300 residents. And I saw an unbelievable story here just in the past week, Doc. I don't know if you saw it or not, but down in Missouri, some of the doctors down there and some of the clinics are saying people are wanting to come in and get vaccinated at this juncture anonymously. They want to make sure it's private. They want to make sure that their friends and family and people that they talk to and maybe even influence don't know that they personally have gotten a vaccine. I mean, that's how bad this thing has gotten with the thoughts and beliefs that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, there's just, you know, George, there's too much misinformation. There's too much politicalization of this. And it just, As Dr. Fauci said a number of weeks ago, he goes, if we would have had this degree of information and politicization years ago, we'd still have polio, smallpox, and measles running around.
Yes.
I understand the hesitancy of people because of how rapidly this vaccine was developed. We're using technology we've never used before. So I can understand initially you don't want to be the first one to get the vaccine, but we've now administered millions and millions and millions of doses. The side effects seem to be relatively quite rare. And so I think the vaccine has really proven itself. I think the next big step is to get full biologic approval from the FDA. They have to have that done by January of 2022. I think they're hoping to have that done in the next couple of months, but it literally is hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of paper pieces of data that they have to review. People ask me all the time, well, is it safe? I would say, yes, it's extraordinarily safe. Is it effective? Yes, it's shockingly effective. I mean, when you think of the flu vaccine as maybe 50-50 at best, we're talking about 90+% efficacy. But people have to, again, I want to define efficacy. Efficacy with this vaccine means you are prevented from getting severe disease, being hospitalized, and die. Okay? The vaccine is not going to protect you 100% from getting mild symptoms of COVID. And now with the Delta variant, we are understanding people are getting mild symptomatic disease who have been vaccinated. Okay, we told you that at the beginning, but we're also learning that even though, with the earlier genomic variations of the virus, we didn't think that it was transmissible as much with after having the vaccine. We know that vaccinated people can transmit the virus. Okay.
Yeah.
So that leads to the question of, okay, why are we all masking again? Well, we're masking because even if I'm vaccinated, I can transmit the virus. And if only half of the population is vaccinated, that means that half of the population is at risk for severe disease. And we also think that the Delta variant will cause more severe disease. So we've regressed a little bit as far as going back to masking, but it again is what we think right now is the most effective public health measure that we have. And it's protecting ourselves, but it's protecting our fellow citizens. And I'm sick and tired of hearing about individual freedoms. Okay. When can we understand that as a society, as a human race, as the world, we are all interconnected. We're all in this together. It's not me versus you, it's us. And so we have to view the world as a system. You view the earth and the universe as a system. And it's incumbent upon all of us to be part of the system so that we can all keep each other well. And I'm sick of hearing individual rights, okay? We're not taking away anybody's rights. We're just asking that you do a very simple thing to protect everyone around you. That's it.
This is the essence of mind-body connection and the things that I've heard you talk about. I just want to interject you. I got to get you to give it, because you're not necessarily, everybody would hear this and think, well, he's talking kumbaya, he's talking figuratively. Not necessarily. You're talking literally. I mean, according to this quantum thing that you've talked about, and I can pick up a little bit on, we actually may be connected in ways that people don't know. And for people to kind of pitch in here and help one another may help everyone.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. We can measure that. And as I tell people in my talks, I said, whatever you put out into the universe is exactly what you get back. And so let me give you an example. You go up to a customer service rep and you start screaming at them because something went wrong. What are you going to get back? An angry, defiant customer service rep.
Yeah. Think airport, folks. Yeah.
Think the airport. I mean, people are going on vacation in mass numbers and we don't have enough workers in the hospitality industry. and they're really fed up with travelers. They're doing the best they can. And so, think of, I go up to the customer service rep and I say, I've got a little bit of a problem, but I know you're going to be able to help me. Oh, sure. I'd love to help you, Dr. Nish. That's no problem. Whatever I put out is what I get back. And it's just so true. And so it's not, this isn't voodoo. This isn't pie in the sky. This isn't, some fairy tale. This is known through quantum physics and through other scientific study.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me that
just be kind, be kind, be gentle.
The Beatles wrote a song about that, folks, if you want to reference that. Well, let's get to the thing that has me out on the ledge a little bit that I started with. And I mean, really has my wife terrified. And these news media outlets, cable television news or quote unquote news in particular, what they want to focus on when it comes to COVID are the fact that the breakthroughs, the people that are fully vaccinated now that are reporting that they're getting COVID, and that was always a possibility, but we always thought that they would get it mildly. Well, there are some reports, and I don't know how prevalent it is, that some of these people are getting sick. They're getting really sick. Do you have any personal knowledge of that just based on your hospital and what's happening out there?
So yeah, if we look at our hospitalizations, and I didn't get this week's report yet. Last week we had 24 people in the hospital. 93.7 of those were unvaccinated. So 6 to 7% were vaccinated. So even vaccinated people, yes, they are landing in the hospital. But again, let's go back to how this vaccine was approved. Number one, it was approved when the dominant circulating COVID was either the original strain or one of the earlier variants. It was not the Delta variant. So it was less contagious, probably less serious. Number two, it was approved because it had a 90+% efficacy in keeping people out of the hospital and keeping them from dying. Okay, I've got 93% of my people are in the hospital or unvaccinated. So we're still in that ballpark. So yes, there are going to be people who are fully vaccinated who are going to get COVID, and a very small percentage of those are going to end up in the hospital. We never said that it was 100%. And so we need a reality check on this. Okay, we need a reality check. People who are vaccinated will get COVID. People who are vaccinated, a very small percentage of them will end up in the hospital. And a very, very small percentage of them will die despite the vaccine. It's going to happen. When you vaccinate millions of people and there's nothing 100% effective, it's going to happen. But let's look at the other side of this coin.
Yeah.
90+% of us will be protected from severe disease and might only get a mild case. Why do we focus on, everybody's getting COVID? No, only a very small percentage of the population who's been vaccinated is getting any type of severe COVID. That vaccine is highly protective. So let's focus on that and let's forget all the other noise. I mean, if this was like the flu vaccine, it's 50-50. We just need to be thankful that it seems to be as good as it is.
Yeah. We overlook and forget that all the time.
Don't live in fear. Fear is a state of heightened anxiety. And when you're anxious, you are suppressing your immune system. You're not doing your body any favors. And so living in a state of fear is living in a state of fight or flight and heightened anxiety. And when we do this, we know we suppress our immune system. We suppress our natural killer cells. We suppress our ability to fight infectious diseases. So it's counterproductive.
I had just to move to the next angle on this, I had a guy with the Iowa State Gaming Association, a friend of mine, Wes Erickey, on the podcast this week. And Prairie Meadows, the big racetrack and casino operation here, is putting in a mask mandate again. If you're going to go inside the casino, you got to wear a mask. But that isn't true everywhere, certainly, and not even at Wells Fargo Arena downtown. The world-famous granddaddy of podcasters, believe it or not, it's not Podcast by George, it's Joe Rogan. He's going to be there. He's a comedian also. He's going to be there this weekend, and Wells Fargo says, no, we're going to have a stadium full of people here, and there is going to be no mask mandate. Now, my understanding is the CDC is telling Polk County, Central Iowa, counties that are high transmission areas, which most of us are, that if you're going indoors anywhere now, you need to be wearing a mask, vaccinated or unvaccinated, correct?
Yes, the CDC is saying that. But now don't we have a state law that you can't mandate masks?
That's correct.
So what I really feel bad for right now are the school systems. How are they going to manage this with our state law saying you can't mandate masks, nor can you have a vaccine passport? It puts them in an enormous bind. But we're going to leave that alone.
Well, as we've talked all along, I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's I tell people that politics is the new religion, and it's bad religion, folks. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't wear a mask. I know hockey players that wouldn't wear one. Oh my God, they wear mouthpieces, they wear face shields, they wear athletic protectors, and they're scared of a
We
mask.
can each do our part. Wear a mask when you're inside. Let's just put that out on your podcast.
Flatly.
In order to protect yourself and protect those around you, just out of human courtesy, please wear a mask.
All right, as we move up from the COVID discussion to another topic, I want to talk about anything that you want to mention here or add on that I didn't ask about.
No, let's move on.
All right, let's take a look. I'm going to bring this up. Okay, so this is out of USA Today. Now, this is interesting on many different levels, and it was interesting to me from a media perspective. It's in the USA Today, so you think, okay, that's mainstream. That shouldn't be anything unusual or out of the normal, and maybe you ought to be trusting it. Well, it's an opinion piece. And you hear people cite articles all the time, and they'll say, well, it was in USA Today. But even the doc has mentioned that. He says, that's opinion. Well, this was an opinion piece, and the headline on it read, "This new test for cancer could save your life. Here's why you can't get it." And a new blood test has the potential to revolutionize the way we detect and treat cancer. But the Federal Trade Commission has held its release so far. Now, this was written by a guy named Jim Greenwood. We'll get to who Jim Greenwood is at the very end of this article. But, Doc, I'm going to read a little bit of this, and you can stop me here anytime you want to and just jump in. It says, cancer accounted for nearly 10 million deaths last year. It continues
Let's stop right there.
Okay, we didn't get very far.
So
go ahead.
There's no context to that number, is there?
No.
Were there 10 million deaths in the United States? Were there 10 million deaths in the world? So he's left the context out. Most people, I think, reading that article would think, oh my gosh, 10 million people die from cancer in the United States?
Yeah.
No, that's 10 million people in the world. Predicted this year, 608,000 will die in the United States of cancer. So no context to that number. Very misleading.
All right, great. Well, there you go, folks. That's what I'm talking about. That we didn't get any farther than that. Let's go back to the article.
Keep going.
Yeah. It says it continues to be the number one cause of death among those 80 or younger. And we know one of the best ways to reduce cancer.
Let's stop there again.
Okay, Doc.
It depends on where you are in the world. It depends on where you are in the United States, whether cancer is the number one cause of death or not. So in the United States, that is not necessarily true at this point. It will be within the next year or two. State by state, there's a difference. So that, as a blanket statement, is marginally true depending on where you are.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm glad we got the doc on board to analyze this for us. Now, I think the rest of that sentence is probably correct. One of the best ways to reduce cancer deaths is through early detection. I don't think anybody would dispute that.
And I would add prevention.
Yes.
You know, we
exactly.
Let's talk about that a minute.
Yeah.
We missed the prevention. So I'll go back to that, George. Go back to that line.
Okay.
So I can read it precisely. Yeah. Because it really is not written precisely either. It says, we know that one of the best ways to reduce cancer deaths is through early detection. Okay, that's a fine statement. But let's also talk about even a better way to reduce cancer deaths is cancer prevention. So let's talk about not smoking. Let's talk about not drinking alcohol. Let's talk about being of a normal body habitus and body weight. Let's talk about getting appropriate vaccinations and treatments for infectious diseases that cause cancer, like hepatitis C and human papillomavirus. So, it's great that we have screening. We have some decent tools to screen people to detect cancer at an earlier stage when it's more curable, but we should really also be talking about prevention in that same breath. So keep going.
Absolutely. To continue now, Mr. Greenwood says, knowing the importance of early detection, what if you could get a single blood test that had the ability to detect the early signs of more than 50 deadly cancers, 45 of which don't have a recommended screening option available before symptoms present themselves? Wow, that sounds great, Doc.
Yeah. So, let's go to that statement. So what he's referring to is something that we call circulating tumor DNA. So as tumors die, all tumors, cells die and cells regrow. We call it programmed death, is called apoptosis. When a tumor outstrips its blood supply, we call it necrosis. And that cell breaks down, it releases what we call this cell-free DNA. So we have snippets, fragments of DNA floating around our bloodstream, but not only from cancer cells, but all kinds of cells that are undergoing programmed death, apoptosis. And so what these blood tests are doing is they're detecting these snippets of DNA in the bloodstream that have cancer mutations. Now, they're very, very rare. So if you took, they can vary from anywhere from 0.1% of the cell-free DNA that's floating around to even up to a couple percentage points. So it's not like, you got millions of copies of DNA floating around your blood. The other thing is, how do we differentiate those cancer DNA snippets from other DNA snippets? So this is technology that's very, very promising, okay? And this technology is being developed. We're using it currently with cancer treatment. So it gives us a really nice snapshot of the cells, what cells are releasing as far as DNA mutations, so that we can adjust our treatments to those mutations that we're detecting with these cell-free DNA analyses. We call them liquid biopsies. So right now in 2021, we are using this technology to help guide us with treatment and to also help guide prognosis, because we know that the more of this cell-free DNA or the more circulating tumor DNA there is in the blood, the worse prognosis people have for their cancer. So yes, we can use this technology now. It is available and we are using it on a limited basis, but we are not at the point where we can use this as a screening test.
That's what this guy's proposing.
That's coming down the road. That's coming down the road. There's no question about it, but it's anywhere from 2 to 5 years away. So there is no test right now that is FDA approved for cancer screening that uses circulating tumor DNA. And what we're trying to figure out is how predictive is finding DNA mutations? How predictive is that of finding a cancer? Are there other things we should be combining with circulating tumor DNA to really improve our ability to detect cancer? So there's what we call biochemical markers, protein molecules that certain cancer cells secrete. So a lot of companies are working on a multi-level test that tests protein markers, that tests circulating tumor DNA, that may even test circulating tumor RNA to really improve our efficacy of not only detecting the cancer, but telling you exactly what kind of cancer we're detecting. Mm-hmm. So let's say right now you detect, circulating DNA and says, oh, you might have a pancreas cancer. Well, what are we going to do with that information if we're detecting DNA long before it's even visible on any kind of imaging test, right? So this information is available, but the clinical studies are in progress as to how do we actually use this information as a screening tool. So we've got a ways to go. The technology is there. The technology is being refined. What we don't know is how can we more precisely use this technology to make sure that we're detecting cancers appropriately and that we're not scaring people in the process.
And to spare our viewers and listeners the rest of this article, this op-ed piece, because it's a long one. I was kind of surprised by that too. I want to show this. I want to jump ahead here several panels, because what this guy's saying, and the doc is delineated, is that basically we are being denied the screening process by the FDA, by the government, basically, and that's the only reason that we don't
FCC.
have. Yeah.
It was the FCC because of this merger between these two companies.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I got you. Yeah. But of course, we have a Democratic-controlled government right now, like it or not. We got a Democrat in the White House. We have a democratically, supposedly controlled Senate, and we have a Democratic majority in the House. The guy that wrote this article, folks, if you go clear to the bottom and almost look at the fine print, this Jim Greenwood that I was talking about, he's a former Republican member of Congress from Pennsylvania, and was the president and CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. I don't know much about that organization, but I got a feeling that it's probably in that membership's best interest for processes like this to get approved and used. So that's opinion. You got to be able to discern the difference between opinion and fact, and make sure you're knowing that you're on the opinion page when you're looking at this stuff. So that's basically what I wanted to show on that, Doc. Anything else on it?
Well, you said this is a process, and that's exactly what this is. We've now developed this technology, which is extraordinary technology. But now we're in the process of studying that technology and how can we most effectively, not only from a clinical detection aspect, but from a financial aspect, how can we most effectively use this technology to screen people for cancer? It's going to happen. We're just not there in 2021. And let me say, there are multiple companies working on this. It's not just the Galil and Illumina or whatever it was company. Yeah. There are multiple companies in this space. And, there's a big prize at the end of that yellow brick road. And that prize is billions of dollars because, you're talking about screening lots of people, and you're talking about screening them multiple times in a lifetime. So it's not a one-time deal. How often do you screen with cell-free DNA? Well, nobody knows the answer to that. If you find a positive screen, then what kind of imaging do you use to find out if they have a cancer that we can see? We don't know the answer to that. So we don't really know how to use this technology right now in a sensible way, but it will come. There's lots of studies going on. I mean, there's one study that company is running. It's enrolling 100,000 people. We don't expect the results of that till 2024. So the scientific method for many people may seem laborious and cumbersome, but we've got to answer the questions. We can't just put these tests out because cancer is a very anxiety and emotionally charged disease. And if we tell someone, oh, you know what, you have cell-free DNA that says you have cancer, and then we can't prove that they have cancer, that's not a really good thing. No. So we've got to be really careful at how we're using this. So you sent me that article. I thought it did a terrible disservice to the general public thinking, oh, you mean the government's blocking me from getting this test? This test is not available as a screening test. It will be, not today.
Well, thanks, Doc. I knew you'd have a exact analysis on that. I really appreciate it. And I enjoy these conversations so much. They always get away from me. I always run out of time here. But I mean, and we're already there and we're past it. I will say this, out of all the guests that I have on the show, I think you're followed probably the most closely. I get more comments when Dr. Nish appears on the show than virtually anyone else. And the good news is, I'm not going to be a spoiler alert here, but there's going to be a way, I think, for you to get to hear more from Dr. Nish more often. But we're going to talk about that in a future podcast. But we're out of time for today. That's going to do it. Doc, I really appreciate you coming back on a podcast by George.
My pleasure, George. Thank you.
And folks, if you like seeing Dr. Nish on Podcast by George, please follow along, subscribe on YouTube, ring the notification bell. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, and you'll always be able to see when he's on the show. And of course, we're on iTunes as well. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.